The riots that began in Minneapolis with the death of George Floyd have since spread to many other cities around the United States. Last night was especially bad. Yesterday, Derek Chauvin, the police who was responsible for the death of George Floyd, was arrested, and Collin Kaepernick also announced he's going to donate money to help this cause. But he's not going to donate to help rebuild the businesses that were destroyed in Minneapolis. Instead, he's going to give money to defend those who did the destroying. Let's look at all of that in this video. We have from the Washington Post that protests erupted, and in many cases they became violent, in places like Atlanta, Portland, Los Angeles, Houston, and Detroit. An article from CNN said that there were more than 30 cities with protests in them. And not every protest got violent. By no means is that true. There were many people who were peaceful, and they were peacefully protesting, and that is very respectable. But in many cases, they did become violent. In Houston, for example, 4 police officers were injured, 8 police vehicles were damaged, and about 200 people were arrested. Cop cars have been vandalized basically all across the nation. All of this is in spite of the fact that the cop who was kneeling on George Floyd's neck, Derek Chauvin, was arrested and is being charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. The other 3 police officers in the video have not yet been arrested, and many people are concerned about that. But I think it's safe to say that arrests are forthcoming for them as well. Now, before we go any further, I just want to show a video that kind of highlights how horrific these riots have actually been. There are many people, like I talked about in my last video, who are trying to defend this, saying that people are just rising up against the police brutality. But if that were the case, why are they rising up and destroying businesses in their own town? That doesn't make any sense. Just watch this video and tell me that this is somehow acceptable.
We found Corboy Bala, who invested his life savings into opening this sports bar, cleaning up. While our camera was there, looters came back to try to steal his safe.
Right, trying to steal the safe.
I don't know what we're gonna do. We're gonna work so hard to get here. So hard.
I want to compare the difference in reaction to the protests we're seeing now and the riots we're seeing now to what we saw with the anti-quarantine protests. You see, back then, we saw headlines like this, where they were essentially accusing of all of the people protesting as being white supremacists or just talking about their white privilege. We also saw things like this, where the Guardian was pointing out that so many people could cause a spike in COVID-19 patients. But we're not really seeing things like that anymore. Even for the people who are protesting peacefully and not rioting, there's still the issue of them being close together and possibly causing a spike in COVID-19. But no one's talking about that because they think it's a more just cause. And if you think it's more just, that's fine, that's your opinion. But let's not pretend that the people protesting because 30 million people, now 40 million people have lost their jobs is not a just protest. And they weren't the ones rioting. They weren't violent. They didn't destroy property. Now we have people who are destroying property, and it's still viewed as kind of okay and justifiable. So much so that Collin Kaepernick decided to insert himself in a very weird way, in my opinion. So he decided to donate money to this cause. But it's not really where you'd expect to go. This is what he said. In fighting for liberation, there's always retaliation. We must protect our freedom fighters. We started a legal defense initiative to give legal representation to freedom fighters in Minneapolis. Essentially what he's saying is that anyone who's arrested in Minneapolis, he will help and donate money to your defense team rather than donate money to the black business owner we just saw who was crying, literally crying, about losing his livelihood and his business. He's going to give money to the people who destroyed that man's business in the first place. It's your money, you can do what you want with it. But if you really care about people in Minneapolis and you want to help out that community, you probably shouldn't be helping the ones who caused the destruction. Rather, you should help those who the destruction has dramatically impacted. And no, I'm not talking about giving money to Target or AutoZone or anything like that. Again, we just saw that video. That man does not deserve what happened to him. Is this what you call justice for George Floyd? Destroying businesses and lighting them on fire? This is my second video about this, and I think it's going to be my last. Even if the riots continue, I don't know really what else to say here. Except, these riots are not acceptable. You can understand the reasoning, you can understand where they're coming from, but that does not make it okay. People's lives are being destroyed. A number of people have died because of these riots across the United States, and yet somehow it's justified because of the death of George Floyd. I don't know about you, but if I died and people were using my name to riot and loot Targets and do stuff like this, I would not appreciate that in the least. This situation has gotten way out of hand, and I really hope that tonight we don't see even more escalation here. For the sake of people whose businesses and livelihoods are being destroyed, let's stop this destruction. Let's stop this violence and just protest peacefully. That's my plea to you guys, even though probably no one who watches this video is going to be part of the violence anyway. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.